Hmm. One of the pieces of language I really appreciated in your Breaking Convention talk was that we amputate things. So we're importing because we don't have psychedelic stuff happening here in the Western world or whatever. Our modern civilization doesn't have a space for it, and yet it's coming in, and so we're trying to figure out how to put it in. And on some level we're looking around like, how did other cultures do it? Okay, but then you said like ayahuasca is a medicine, and it's in the talk you say it's a medicine, and it's an education, and it's spiritual practice, and it doesn't fit into any particular category. And the language you use is that we end up taking, like, not necessarily the case with ayahuasca right now, this is where you said it kind of bucks the trend, but we have historically ended up taking plants out of, like, and importing them, and then taking them out of their cultural context, and then bringing the use of the plants, but not any of the culture around that use. That, as you had said, you give a culture long enough times and they can even make poison into food. That we kind of lose that part, and that process is a process of sort of amputating something essential about that plant and its relationship to humans as we integrate it. And so thinking about bringing in psychedelics now, like there's the medicalization tract, which again, like we both say, like, that's good, let's keep that going. However, here are some concerns, right? And then there's other ways to sort of legitimize it, like religion, but it's not entirely religion. And you have this quote in your talk, which I thought was fantastic, and it really fits with my thoughts on things right now, and very much this whole thing that you're talking about is really in alignment with what I want to do with this podcast, which is really start to be like, okay, well, let's have conversations about things that are all relevant to being human and alive, and wonder about how those things fit into the context of psychedelics as a part of our lives, so that there's a cultural context for a psychedelic use that is directly relevant to a sort of complex thinking about what it means to be a human, a part of the modern Western civilization, taking psychedelics as psychedelics come in. And in that is, of course, interacting with the mainstream. And this is your quote: "The danger is in the path of transforming the relationships of our societies with psychedelics. Instead, what we do is transform psychedelics until our society as it is today can digest it." And it makes me think of Stephen Jenkinson saying, when we're going mainstream, what ends up happening is we start shaving the edges off this thing until it's so palatable that it's basically indistinguishable from the mainstream itself. So what are your thoughts around that? For me, I end up wanting to stay away from reading guys like Michael Pollan and this kind of thing, because I don't want to be having the Michael Pollan conversation. I don't want to be speaking Michael Pollan's language as I think about these things, as I talk about these things. But what are your thoughts on this process? What does it look like for us as a psychedelic culture to be aware of this danger and to engage it in a way where we're still helping to show up to the mainstream's, integration of psychedelics?
Yeah, I have a small story about that. Some time ago, I was doing this, commercial work, like I said, in my other life. I've done sort of large design projects, and this was, very big client, very corporate thing, very complicated, and many moving pieces, and I had to jump in, and I was working 1 month, 7 days a week, and it was meetings all day. There was 11 different countries involved, and lots of discussions, and very complicated. And it came, and so I decided to microdose LSD, and I was taking every 3 days, and it really helped me with the work. But then, at some point I realized, there's something really paradoxical here. People used to take LSD to quit the office, and here I am taking it so I can, be more efficient in it, under inhuman pressure. This is an example of how we will have this tendency to do that, right? We will have this tendency to sort of fit psychedelics as and amputate many things about them, and just sort of make them comfortable for things as they are, But I think in this thing, I think it's very important. One thing that I always say is, I think the energy. This is also the way of the world. If you look at, I don't know, poetry, mystical poetry. There's three guys, they're probably, or three persons, who are like deeply committed to thing, or 20 or 50 are deeply committed. They live very humbly and they are creating amazing work. And then there's, 50 or 200 people that are doing so-so. And then there's 2,000 people writing bad spiritual poetry. And then there's postcard poetry, and it's the same thing with filmmaking, and it's the same thing with music, and it's the same thing with therapy, with food, with everything, right? This is the way of the world. There's always going to be, a large sort of delusion at the base of things, where things get very diluted, and then somewhere on the top, there's going to be a group of people that are extremely committed to doing the best possible work. The job of the Film Academy is not to fight bad films. There's always going to be bad films. The job of the Film Academy is to recognize and reward the work of the people that are doing amazing work. I think this sort of focus, this sort of shifting focus, would be very useful in general in the sort of psychedelic scene. It's not about who's doing bad work, because there always will be bad work, and not just that, there's going to be more and more and more and more as these things, there's sort of a gold rush now around psychedelics, and it's a hype, and droves of people are going to arrive, and they're going to do all sorts of things that we might find unpalatable or tasteless or even worse. The issue is not that. The issue is not to fight that. I don't think you can fight that. But I think what we can do and what we need to do is to create systems, within what we do that recognizes, rewards, and sort of like gives attention and gives focus to the people who are doing incredible work, who are incredibly committed, who have been working on this for a very long time, who are thinking deeply about this, and who ultimately become sort of a reference for everybody. I think. At least for myself, that's how I try to approach this, because these conversations very often goes to, it's all going to hell, and it was better before they were famous, and right? It's like the bands that we all liked, and all of this. But the thing is, I don't think much can be done about that. I think it's the way of the world, it's the way of our cultures, right? What we can do, though, it's really make sure that the people that are doing, important, amazing, committed, profound work, get recognition somehow, and get given the sort of I don't know if this is a word, this status or the sort of, but the place that they deserve, which is a sort of as reference points for everybody, as pointers of what this could be in the best of circumstances. Which is what happens with poetry, with filmmaking, and with everything else. There's a few people there that just become sort of, they become models for everyone.
It's interesting. That's almost like part of my language, but it's almost like a capitalist approach to things in some sense, because it's like in capitalism there's sort of a competitive edge to the acquisition of capital, and so it's like and that draws everybody, we'll say, if the goal of capitalism was supposedly a better quality of life for civilization. Didn't turn out that way. But it's to bring everybody up as we all sort of like move and compete our ways to the top, which might be something akin to what you're talking about here, which is like, instead of making the culture all about sort of like pointing fingers at and getting angry where things are going wrong, we're actively making efforts towards doing things really well, and then actively acknowledging that the people and the groups are doing these well things as a point of celebrating something. I think this is maybe a Buddhist tradition, and I had heard it talked about in other sort of like personal development type things, which is like to meditate on the Buddha as if you are the Buddha, or that another one is like, if there's somebody who's doing something that you really like in the world, instead of getting down on yourself for not being able to do it, you celebrate that they can do it, and something about that calls it out more so in yourself. And I could see something like that happening inside of psychedelic culture we do have to continue to talk critically about, what's often called like bad actors in the scene, and find ways to deal with that. And also at the same time, not to forget that there are people who are doing really positive, incredible work, and that giving them a spotlight exposes that quality of work to more people, which allows more people to be inspired to step in to that way of being in psychedelic culture, which then would influence more people and then sort of like create this lift, this sort of progressive trend towards sort of, I don't know, betterment in the culture itself.
Yeah, again, it's like I think it's like everything else. If you look at everything else in our culture, whatever, from yoga to cooking to literature, to this is sort of how it works. There seems to be a few people who are extremely successful, by sort of diluting. I'm talking about Sylvester Stallone movies, right? But that's not exactly the high artistic point of filmmaking. It's not.
I don't know, man.
There are
Back in
some
the '80s, like the
He was good.
1980s
Yeah,
action film,
Rocky
that was
One
like
was good.
apex of action movies, you know?
Rocky, the first Rocky was quite amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you know what I mean, right? It's not, and there always be the sort of, people that seem to be, or at least that's, it's my preference. I always find that in the second or third sort of row of everything, literature, filmmaking, whatever, you find these people that are sort of, they're professionals. They're making a living out of what they're doing. They're not so well known, although they're known, and their work is amazing. And it's there. It's not at the top. It's actually 2 levels down, where you find all of these people that are, fully professionalized. They're writers, at least that. They're perhaps more minority, but they have sort of commitment to the work. That is fantastic. So that's what you have, like, critics awards, and you have, things, and film festivals and things that are not, exactly the Oscars, but something that points. And I think the people at the top and the people that sort of at the bottom take care of themselves. The issue is, how we make sure that the people that are doing incredible work can continue to do it and thrive, right?